Yeah, we're live again uh, for another fantastic session of the Teachathon conference and the 24-hour online global conference. And right now we have Kevin Bartlett. He's a well traveled personality, not just an educator, but he's been into art and all that. But he was driven into some form of education by the need that he saw in education. I'm really excited about that because now people with passion makes the most impact. And we're glad to have Kevin on the conference. Kevin, you're welcome.
Thank you, John.
Yes. So I'll be putting on your presentation, the new playbook, and you can actually start off right away.
Okay, thanks, John. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the whole business of learning and the need to rethink what we do in schools and out of schools. My own background is leading schools, two in Africa, two in Europe, and founding learning organizations like the IB Primary Years Program and now the Common Ground Collaborative. One of the conclusions I've reached is that if we were to think of learning as a game metaphorically, it needs a new playbook. We need to rethink the way we think about learning, for me, almost from scratch. So the big why for me is when I look at schools, I see disconnected places. I see more silos than systems. Those of you who've ever been on the London Underground will know the phrase, mind the gap. And I look at schools, I see gaps everywhere, gaps between what we promise and what we deliver, parental expectation and the real school, between kids and what they think is worth learning, between departments, between disciplines. And I just think we can do better. So I founded the Common Ground Collaborative, which is a global nonprofit. We now have a large membership of individuals and schools just to try and do a better job. Because for the kids, for all the games they play, and they play many, really learning is the only game in town for them. Learning will determine their futures. Learning how to learn will determine how successful they are. And I'm kind of dreaming of a game where we all know the playbook and we play according to principles versus rules. And a game in which every kid, I don't know if you know this acronym, I learned it when I was the British director of the only European international school with a big American football program. So every kid feels like the most valuable player in this game. Every day, every kid feels like the MVP, which is what they are to their parents and to themselves and should be to us. I'm interested in a game where parents know how to play. Instead of being bewildered observers or at best ill-informed cheerleaders, they're actually in the game. And where every teacher is a coach, leading a learning team and treating it like a team. All the kids playing together, the small team helping each other, getting ready for the learning of the day at the beginning of the day, wrapping up the learning at the end of the week in small teams, bringing closure to learning. So that's kind of the big picture, the game of learning as a metaphor. So having started with why, we need to get to the how and the what, so we get practical. For me, this has been a 30-year sort of mega, macro, meta inquiry driven by 4 guiding questions. So I asked myself, if you were reinventing the learning game, what questions would you need to ask? Came up with 4. The first one is, what is learning anyway? How do we do that stuff? It's an odd profession where we haven't defined the work before we started it. So the first question is the define question. What is learning? Then once you've decided what learning is, you have another question about content. You can't learn in a vacuum. So our second question, what's worth learning and why? And how does it all fit together into a continuum, kindergarten through 12 or pre-K through 12? So what is learning? What's worth learning? And then how do we teach for that? Most important thing is what's happening in the classroom. So how do teachers teach for learning? And then finally, probably the most important question, If we don't know if the kids are learning, the whole thing is a waste of time. The whole game is a waste of time. So how do kids show us what they've learned? So define, design, deliver, demonstrate. And we use those 4 questions to build an entirely new learning ecosystem. So I'm just going to walk through those 4 Ds, and that will be the presentation, and then we can have a conversation. So the first question, what is learning anyway? How do we do that stuff? We'll save these questions to the end, and we'll see what you think. Our conclusion after years of thinking was driven by our principle of simplicity. Always try to find the simplest way of doing things. So we distilled learning down to 3 kinds of learning. The learning of ideas, conceptual learning, the learning of skills, competency learning, and the learning of values and dispositions, of character. So within the Common Ground Collaborative, we talk about the 3 C's of learning: conceptual learning, competency learning, and character learning. Deliberately chosen as alliteration because for no other reason that it makes it easy to remember. Also makes it easy to share with kids, easy to share with parents. So we begin to have, for the first time, a simple, common learning language. Those 3 are always interacting. So we think of it as the DNA of learning. 3 strands of learning, the triple helix of the CGC, the DNA of learning. And then we created simple pedagogies to go with each of the 3 C's. So conceptual learning is approached through a simple form of inquiry. Connect with what the kids already understand. With additional information, help them construct a new theory, check it out and contribute it to the shared knowledge base. And we created sentence stems. For conceptual learning, I understand that. I used to think that, now I understand that. So connect, construct, contribute, and we understand that. We see that as its own spiral, always through life, connecting, contributing, constructing, connecting. Competency learning, skills-based learning has a different pedagogy. When we want kids to learn a skill, we show them what good looks like in a model. We help them deconstruct it. We help them identify where they are against good and practice to close the gap. And we use a sentence stem. We are able to, they are able to, I am able to. And for character, again, a different pedagogy. Place them in contexts that are authentic, that are challenging. Ask them to consider how to act on that consideration, and reflect on it. And as we do that, as people, we become more. So 3 C's, each with their own pedagogy, providing a shared learning language, teacher clarity, collective teacher efficacy as we plan together. And those 3 C's run all the way through our learning ecosystem. They drive the modules we write, they drive the assessment at the end. And a new conversation for parents around the dinner table. I've asked this question all over the world, in China, in India, in Africa, in Cayman Islands. When parents say to kids, what did you do in school today? The universal answer, albeit in different languages, nothing. We're saying, we're asking kids their own questions. We'll provide you as parents with questions to ask that get to really, really meaningful, constructive dinner table conversations about learning itself. So, defining learning, 3 kinds of learning: conceptual, competency, character, always interacting, metaphorically shown as a triple helix, or the DNA of learning. Then to continue the metaphor, you can't learn in a vacuum. DNA doesn't live in a vacuum. DNA shapes a body. So what body of knowledge for these kids, today's kids all over the world? Or to put it another way, what's worth learning and why, and how do the pieces fit? We said, first of all, it's worth learning to be experts with deep conceptual understanding, high levels of competency, and strong, positive moral character. But then to take the question more broadly into the bigger issue of content, relevant content for these kids. We said for our students all over the world, the important thing, or one important thing, is to address what's common to all people. So we grouped all knowledge under 6, what we called human commonalities. We said All of us seek meaning in our lives. We want to belong to something bigger than ourselves. We want to lead a balanced existence that contributes something that has some purpose. Reading across the top, we all seek to understand how the universe works, what patterns and principles govern the movement of objects, so the math and sciences. We all inhabit one planet, and we're rapidly destroying it. And as they say, there's planet A, but there's no planet B. So we need to become better stewards of our planet. We're all members of groups, and group membership, we believe, is the driving evolutionary force for human society. The groups we belong to, the groups we don't belong to, how we treat people within our groups. So all of the social studies, history, geography, economics, civics, government, we're all storytellers. We're a storytelling species. That began on the plains of Africa when we learned how to cook food and gathered in increasingly large social groups to share food around fires. And because of the complexity of the group, our brains began to grow and our facility for language began to grow. We've always been storytellers. As Daniel Pink said, we are programmed to remember stories, not facts. And we're all artists. We all have great imagination and the power to create things that do not yet exist, whether that's technology, artifacts, a play, a dance, a story. So we decided that we would cluster content around human commonalities, and underneath those, the disciplines. Here's an example. Stories and signals, we're all storytellers. We all send messages to each other. On the left, the same idea in Mandarin. On the right, the same idea in Arabic, because all of our major work is presented in multiple languages from multiple cultures, using our global network as translators and communicators with us. That's one wrong end of the telescope look at one of the human commonalities. They all fit into one map. This is the CGC's map of human commonalities. All human learning mapped out under disciplines with their definitions and their key concepts, with the big organizer being human commonalities. Then we said, well, that's fine. It's a great theoretical model, but what does a teacher do with that? We said, we're going to turn this into learning in inspiring ways, but very practical ways. So using the human commonalities as the vertical organizers of this grid, we've created the learning matrix. It's a K through 10, K through 12 matrix of powerful learning modules aligned under human commonalities and connected to each other. To make sure we address content that really matters, every one of our modules begins with a powerful question. Why do we fight? How do wolves change rivers? Why learn? How does money work? Why lead? So what's real news? Where are all the yellow crayons? All of our modules are driven by powerful, compelling questions that signal that this is an inquiry that will engage learners. So this is how that looks as a moving graphic. 3 C's and now 3 M's. The map, the matrix, the module. Always simple, always connected. The map, the matrix, the module. On our website, teachers click on particular maps and modules and they get to their own version of their own module. Right now it's a Google site for each one and then Google Docs so people can write their own and modify ours. So again, simplicity, system, synthesis, from complexity to clarity, giving teachers the tools they need and only addressing learning that actually matters. Our modules are written very simply as well. We start with the why. We always identify the purpose of the module and why it's worth learning. Then what kids will learn, organized under the 3 C's, conceptual goals, competency goals, character goals. And then following the lead of understanding by design, we plan the assessments, the evidence, and only then do we plan the actual methodology, how they're going to learn it. So it's always simplicity. What we're doing now also is working with schools all over the world for kids to write their own learning modules, coming up with their own compelling question, experimenting with that. They are well able to do it. Our modules are simple enough in system for them to write their own and learn their own and share them and learn each other's. So a heavy emphasis in the CGC on student voice and choice. And sometimes everybody stops the regular schedule and we look at one big complexity challenge together. Here's an example: artificial intelligence. Is it a threat or an opportunity? And in those sessions, teachers and kids decide who they're going to be: a historian, an artist, an economist, a mathematician. And we explore a particular question from different disciplinary perspectives through different lenses, and then come together to share what we've learned in major learning celebrations with the community invited. So the map, the matrix, the module, student voice and choice, complexity challenges. That's the CG's answer to the question, what's worth learning and why? Then to teaching, the most important part. Everybody knows that the quality of learning is largely determined by the quality of teaching. That's no surprise to anyone in this teachathon. That's why we're teachers. We know we make a difference. So what's our take on teaching? How do we do that and make that simple and understandable? We're huge believers in the notion of great organizations are framed not by complex rules and regulations, but by a few shared principles. So we work with schools to co-create 4 or 5 deeply believed learning principles. A principle is a shared truth that brings freedom and order to the system. So principles are over rules, because principles, along with language, build culture. A culture shares values. A culture shares a language. So we have the shared language of the 3 C's. We have the shared values of our learning principles. Because as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Changing schools is reculturing schools. And if we don't change the culture, nothing else changes. So here's an example of a school set of learning principles. The idea of self-regulated learning, teaching kids how to learn. The idea that a school is a learning culture with shared values and shared language. The idea that learning is social and emotional and personal, as well as cognitive. The idea that learning transfer happens best in rich, relevant contexts. And the idea that learning environments have a major impact on the quality of learning. So simple, again, simple. 5 learning principles that drive our practice. They have to drive our practice because without practice, principles are nothing. There's an old saying, practice makes perfect. It's not necessarily true. It depends on what you're practicing, but it does make things rather permanent. So we better be careful what we practice. What we do is we take a principle, here's an example, self-regulation, and we turn it into learning practices. So in this image, the kid is saying, I'm able to set my own learning goals, and the teacher is saying, I'm able to teach and model purposeful goal setting. So learning principles, learning practices, teaching practices. Starting with why again. We teach this way because we want to see the kids being able to do these things. And then finally, how do they show us what they've learned and how do they share that with us and with their parents and with their next school or college? We've worked on a simple form of self-assessment built into the system. What the kids do is they look back over the period of learning. We have very nice models for self-assessment. For conceptual learning, they state the content and then they'll say, I used to think that, now I understand that, here's my evidence. For competency learning, I used to struggle to, now I'm able to, here's my evidence. For character learning, as a person I think I'm becoming more, here's my evidence. So closing the learning circle, beginning by defining learning as the 3 C's, and closing the learning circle by self-assessing against the same 3 C's. Very much a system. Everything is systematized. So define, design, deliver, demonstrate. One simple, clear, connected learning ecosystem with its component parts. The 3 C's as the definition of learning. The map, the matrix, the modules as the content. Principles turned into practice as the pedagogy. and self-reporting, self-assessment against the 3 C's as the demonstration. Looking back over the last few months, there's nothing we didn't know. All we're doing is this: pointing out the painful discovery of the blindingly obvious. Using these methods, kids are more engaged. They know how to learn. That means when they're at home, they're in charge of their own learning. With these methods, teaching it to the parents, I'm also writing now the parents' learning playbook and the students' learning playbook. Parents may have a much, much better understanding of how learning works because they're going to have to support their kids at home. And they need a language to do it with. So a new relationship between learning and the parent, learning and the student, learning and the teacher, learning and the school. Always obvious, but it took a pandemic to make us see it more clearly. Who knew? We all knew. We all knew, but we didn't do anything about it. There's a wonderful business book called The Knowing-Doing Gap. Cognitively, we knew this stuff. We used to say we need to educate our parents, but we never really did it consistently. So we knew this stuff, but now we really have to act on it. So learning is the same game, but we need a new playbook. A simple, systemic, connected playbook where every kid is the MVP in the game, where every parent is an active player, where every teacher is a coach, where kids really learn and are in charge of their own learning, and where what they learn is worth learning because we're going to teach them stuff that matters, that will really be usable by them as they go through their lives. So, John and everybody, that's the material, that's the input. Now, what would be very useful to me is to get feedback and have conversations. So I'll come out of the slideshow and go back into the visible part. And John, you have to guide me from here because you've been leading these sessions. So
Yes, that's a very beautiful one. Yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I think something is echoing into the feed. Can you? I'm receiving an echo.
hold on, I don't know why, but
Okay. If you have two systems on, you have to mute one of the systems.
I don't think so. But is it still echoing?
Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Yeah, hope you can hear me. So,
Do you still have an echo, John?
yeah, I think it's better right now.
Okay. I had two
So,
computers going. I switched one off.
oh, great. Yeah. So now, if I could say this was one of the best presentation that I actually saw in this 24-hour conference. Yeah, we still have like 3 hours more, but yeah, and you did it in a flight such that I'm kind of like, yeah, it's I have to go over the idea and the conceptual analysis of the new playbook again. So where I'm going to start off from is this: how do people get to uh, yeah, is it individuals or is it institutions that needs to connect to the CGC on the playbook?
I'll show you. I didn't do the last slide, John.
Okay.
There. So what's happening now is schools are working with us all over the world. A lot of startup schools, lots of people starting alternative schools. Those are our contact details. Or our Twitter hashtag is at KevinCGC.
Yeah. So that's fine. So you kind of think definitely it's going to be institutions that are going to come at with a very comprehensive and detailed uh, uh, if conceptual requirement like this, it's institutions and organizations like Ministry of Education that are really interested in doing transforming the learning process that would need to come in for this, right, Kelvin?
Yeah, we're working with all kinds of organizations, John. We have pretty much a whole curriculum mapped out now. But the nice thing is we don't impose anything on anybody. We're not a bureaucracy. We're non-profit, non-commercial, non-governmental. Um, and that opens up the possibility of many kinds of different people working with us, from individual parents to ministries of education.
Okay, that's very fine. Uh, now, what one thing that I want to be clear about right now, yeah, the CGC project is a research on one hand and is a solution on another hand. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's been a professional investigation for decades for me. And then we founded ourselves formally as a nonprofit about 6 years ago. But what we decided, John, from the very beginning is we were not going to be just speakers at conferences. We were not going to be just researchers. We are practitioners.
Okay.
I've always attached myself to a school. I still work in a school now, even though I run CGC. So I'm based in Honduras, San Pedro Sula, because we have to think like practitioners. You know, someone writing a book about how learning needs to be is of very little help to a teacher. We said we cannot just highlight the problem, we have to be the solution. So that's what we set out to do.
So I would have to say this with the kind of uh, concept that this is. And at this period, yeah, when 6 years ago, when you started the CGC project, you never anticipated uh, perhaps a COVID, though you already know that there were issues in the learning processes everywhere. But with COVID, it becomes apparent, it becomes very clear that the learning process needs a change. So, what does the CDC project? What do you kind of like pinpoint in this period of moving in, out of the pandemic? What do you? What's your outlook? What do you point to that needs to get on as a transformation for education systems and the learning process across schools across the world?
Yeah, I think several things, John. One is we need to change the relationship with parents, so we need to teach them how to be learning resources at home. We need to teach kids, for example, how learning works, because they can't be online all the time. But if they're working their way through one of our learning modules, they can easily be offline for hours because the teacher works with them on the next question to be explored. They can go off and explore that on their own, then come back again. So we have to be able to work in alternating online, offline, online, offline. And I think this inquiry-based way of working, where kids go off to explore and come back and share their findings, is actually ideal for online learning. So we just think CGC is now coming into its own with everything it's been saying, because if you see learning as giving direct instruction to kids, well, then they have to be online so you can give them direct instruction. That means sticking kids in front of a screen for hours and hours. It's killing them, John. We're wearing them out and we're exhausting our teachers. But to be able to say, okay, we're going to meet again in an hour or 2 hours. In the meantime, here are the 3 questions we said we would explore. Go off and find the best answers and come back with one other question of your own. And then we'll continue either today or tomorrow. So there's that long, continuous flow of learning with the kids coming in and out of it, instead of just the direct delivery over and over again. hour after hour. It just doesn't work. We cannot hold their attention for that long. They have to be engaged. They might be physically online, but they're mentally somewhere else. So inquiry-based learning simplified is a great way to engage kids, especially if you try to make sure that what we're teaching about actually matters to the kid. So if a kid says, excuse me, why are we learning this? We need to be able to say, because this is what makes us human, because this is something we're all going to use. We need to know how money works. We need to know why we fight. These are critical social issues right now. So choosing important stuff that really matters, exploring it with the kids as a form of engaged inquiry. They don't have to be online all the time. They can be going and inquiring and coming back with their findings individually, in a group. I think it's an ideal model for these current times, because you and I probably both agree, I don't think these pandemics are going to go away. You know, we'll be in and out of school for the next few years as far as we can tell. So I can't hear you, John, right now.
Sorry, my mic is mute. I said that that's a very important information and insight that the CTC project is actually bringing into the learning space, because yeah, you kind of like begin to wonder, if we say kids should learn online, now that means that they will be staring at the screen for as long as you want them to be, and then the relationship will kind of like be more attached to the screen than really getting to feel so many things. And uh, like art, you talked about art while you're talking up. These are things that you have to get all out, imagine things, make a lot of decisions, play with things, break things, learn from it, and all that. But doing online programs, especially with kids, is a big old deal. So now, uh, I want to. I'm giving a scenario. Um, I want to, as an educator or as a school administrator, I want to really have effectual learning system in my community. Where do I start off from? I haven't talked about the new playbook. Where is it that I need to start up to start to build all of this up gradually, because I know it's actually a process. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the way we start, John, is through conversations. Teams call us, schools call us, individuals call us. We begin to discuss how to build this ecosystem together. Everything we do is co-created with the school or with the individual group, especially now with a lot of startup schools, like I said. And then we work our way through the 4Ds, through the ecosystem. We co-create the learning language. I work with teams online to create their learning principles through storytelling with them. So we basically, if you see the 4Ds as a kind of architecture, we build that building together from the ground up through conversations, sharing products, sharing ideas, in a long series of generative conversations. I'm often online for 2 hours a week with each school, and we're going through the school construction process together. And it's very gratifying. It's lovely work to be doing, because schools tend to join us when they have a shared passion for constructivist learning.
Mm.
They know projects like Understanding by Design, Making Thinking Visible, Project Zero. So we come out of the same philosophy, and we simply construct the model with them. It's very much a process of co-creation. Everything is customized, but the principles, we always remain true to the same design principles.
Mm. Yeah, so the design principle and getting on to a conversation to start up with, And I appreciate the fact that you decided to come on and yeah, you're igniting the conversation, and I think very, very important to the whole process of the education system going forward right now is the conversation is actually key. Uh, and that's even one of the necessities and essence of which we came up with the teachers on conference that now have people that are going to make the bring in presentations, but at the same time, it's going to ignite a conversation. 24 hours, well, perhaps some might look at it that it's really very small. How much content do you want to have to talk about there? But at the same time, when you look at several people coming up from different perspectives to actually talk about the different processes and what they look at, yeah, you see that it's actually trying to start up something, initialize something that people should start to keep talking about, looking up to, form networks, form relationships, and try to kind of like empower the learning process. Yeah. So thank you, Kevin, for doing this. And I think that so now do like the new learning playbook. Um, you said you decided to build a curriculum. When is it going to be out, and what does it entail for an organization to have access to that, whatever it is?
Um, well, first of all, going back to what you were just saying, John, the wonderful Canadian thinker Michael Fullan um, talks about conversations in a very compelling way. He says we are all meaning makers, sense makers, and our best sense making tool is conversation. And
Yeah.
then David Perkins, equally brilliant, wrote a great book, King Arthur's Round Table, all about organizations as conversations. That's what he says. He says organizations are conversations.
Mm,
Conversations are the virtual neurons of any organization. And we need to make conversation space in the classroom with the kids. We rush them through stuff and we never get to know them well enough. We don't build enough relationships, but we need to give them space to talk and think. Um,
mm,
the second part of what you were saying, schools basically contact us. They join the CGC, the global network, and then we contract with them basically for a number of years to help them build their learning ecosystem. And we have a very nice website, our community website called CGC Connect, and all new modules are loaded up there. 3 more went up today. Uh, 3 very, very nicely written science modules. So yeah, it's a global network with a regular membership, John, and a community website and lots of working parties building on various different conversations. So CGC Connect is the place to go. If any of your listeners are interested, then I'll send you the details, and people for free can become what we call CGC Explorers. And you can go on the website, look at our stuff, no commitment, no cost, and just explore what we have. And then if people are more interested, we have about 4 levels of engagement from explorer all the way through to full on collaboration. So what we're trying to do, John, is spread the word as widely as we can, make it as accessible, as affordable as possible. We have individual membership now, which is at a very, very low price, just because our goal is to reach as many kids as possible. So we're spreading our network, trying to make it as easy as possible for people to get involved.
mm. So those are what remembering becoming a CGC explorer to start to get into the conversation, and it's very
Yes, that's
very
right.
important. Yes,
Yeah,
so
if you
it's
need
very
any details, John, I'll send them to you, and you could distribute them around your network.
okay. Okay, yeah, I'm going to talk to you after we're through, and then those ones that we're going to be able to have access to, so that we can display it and share it with all the our registrant, all our participants from every part of the world and every so because these are things that people need to really know about and know how to get started with and continue the process because the classroom is changing and the learning process needs to drive the classroom. Now, and we don't have the classroom as forward place again. Anyone that thinks the classroom is just the forward place now has lost it since the COVID. So the classroom is changing, and learning has to change to take a different shape and size. And that's what I think the new playbook has actually brought across to us. So thank you, Kevin. We really appreciate you doing this.
No, it's a pleasure, John. Nice to talk to you again.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity for us to have Kevin Bartlett of the CGC project. It's a global project as it is, and uh, is championing a cause that's going to transform the learning process continually. No, it's not just it's not one thing. It's several things that needs to be continually in the process, in the remaking, design, and the redesigning process continually. And we really appreciate your mindset and your readiness to actually make an impact for the learners in the classroom. Thank you so much, Kevin.
It's a pleasure, John. See you again.
Yeah, so
Have a
yeah,
rest of the
so
evening.
thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Yeah, bye. Yeah, so everyone, yeah, we still have backstage. Let me check what we have and who we have, and we are not living here yet. Okay, yes, so. So we're going to have Donald Tuba coming in shortly. Let me check my order list for the other presentations that we have because we are getting in on the home run right now, and it's really getting so much interesting for us here. Uh, yeah, you're going to be learning about getting flexible with iFlex, lessons learned. And that's a research by the Taliton contingent. So you won't want to miss that. It's going to be really, really fantastic. Dr. Erin Pierce is going to start lead that, and it's going to really flow from that. What is the flexible? I mean, what's the iFlex project? I bet you really want to know about it. Then Daniela Phillips, she wants to tell you how to engage, quick tips to increase engagement in remote learning. It's not yet time for you to kind of like convert your maybe boring uh, face-to-face learning to remote learning because you're not even seeing the learners face-to-face anymore. So you have to think of doing a whole lot of engagement, a massive way of shifting and tweaking things to make sure that you engage the learner. So how do you get about this? That is what Daniela Phillips wants to tell us. And then Donald Tuber and Frank the Medico wants to talk about build a better school. What does that mean? Yeah, while pandemic shut down the schools, we all went back to building a school. So a different school. So now it is not what you knew as the building that was not the school. And I think right now the definition of the school is now changing. As I told, as I spoke with Kevin Bartlett about it, yeah, the classroom, the mindset of what the classroom is, it has changed forever. So if you still believe that the classroom is a forward place, you got to check it. So things have actually changed right now. So how do we build a better school? And Donald Tuber and Frank De Medico are going to be talking about that. So I hope you still want to join us for that. And then yeah, still coming afterwards. We have Jen Lee. Yeah, she's my favorite. And she's going to be talking about change management. Uh, She's an empathy person. Uh, yeah, a whole lot of educators are already having so many issues in through the change, the speedy change which the pandemic really brought. But yeah, Jen is going to help us out. And finally, Monica Bones. Yeah, Dr. Monica Bones is going to be talking about injecting creativity into your classroom. You know, I said the classroom is changing, so you've got to be creative about it. So Monica Bones captures both ends of the wheel and brings us together into talking about creativity and the new classroom that we're talking about. So please, uh, if you're still about to sleep, wake up, take a stretch, and join us on the next links. We have all the links. Just go to Teachathon, www.teachathonnetwork.com/P, P for presentation, just with /P, and you're going to see all of the sections with all of the links there, and you see the others of the new presentations I'm going to have. So I'll see you on the other side. Thank you very much.